Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we're going to look at some of the principles that we talk about all the time, and we've gone to the European Championships in Porridge, Croatia for 3 examples that really illustrate these principles very, very well so that you can understand what we're talking about from a practical, real example. If that sounds fun, stick with us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. So we're almost at the 100 mark, so we're getting there. We're pushing on through the episodes each week. So this week we will be looking again at the Euros and some good examples that we've seen from high-level competition. So what we're going to kind of base this on is some of the examples and principles that we've set out that are very important for you to have in the back pocket to be able to be a stable sparring competitor in ITF Taekwondo. So if you haven't checked that out yet, look in the description, and we have an ebook there with 10 principles that you must have if you want to be a top level fighter.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first one we've picked kind of really helps us to answer the most commonly asked question, which is, how do I fight a bigger fighter? And like, this is the one, if we go back to the very start for us, the question that we've got most common across all social media, emails, everything, is that one. Anytime we do a Q&A, this one comes up. So it's still relevant to people all of the time. So for this one, we've picked Artur Kuzmin from Ukraine. And this is the final of the 75 kilo junior male against Kamil from Poland. And I think we get some really good examples from Ukrainian in blue as to how to go about sparring a taller opponent.
Yeah, so obviously the range is a little bit more extended for him. So his job here is essentially bypassing that distance into the mid-range to get the hands. And you can see that's his ploy to get the scores on the board, and he kind of messes up at the start a little bit, but once he finds that range and gets into it, he does really, really well. Now, he does come forward quite strong, and it's hard to push him back, but one of the big things that makes the difference is he's able to find every now and again a headshot off the hands when he gets his opponent on the back foot.
Yeah, and we can see even just from the flashes there, they're very, very close to being a good score from Poland there, that the smaller fighter always has that risk. You know, if you get your timing wrong and your distance wrong, you find yourself in the range of the taller fighter, you'll get clipped. But if you can bring it to your own range, you can get inside the range of that front leg and be fast and have the right timing, then you can put yourself in a position where it's very hard for the taller fighter to get you. And it always brings me in mind, like my brother's a soccer manager, and you'd be talking about the goalkeepers and where to put a penalty and everything, and that you want to have the goalkeeper not sure whether they should go with their leg or their hand. And that's the exact same kind of thing that we're trying to do in terms of managing these taller fighters. Is you want them doubting whether they can catch you with the leg, but not quite prepared to go to the hands. And that's the kind of the perfect distance that we want to be in.
Yeah, for Artur as well, and for anybody who's like the smaller fighter, what you don't want is somebody who's a big, rangy, tall fighter putting you on the end of their leg and putting you on the back foot all the time.
Yeah.
But he's very crafty on the defensive side. He knows when to bail out. He knows when to pull angles to give him more space in the ring. And that's a key as well if you're the smaller person, to not leave them get a run on you, let's say. So
Absolutely.
He does a great job of being sharp on the defensive side. He has a good solid front leg when he needs it. He puts a stop. He's well able to move, which is a key if you're the smaller person. And then he's picking the correct moments when to interrupt the rhythm and to get forward with his hands himself. So I think that's the key. Like, here's a good example of that. Here's a key if you want to be the smaller person who is winning against the bigger guys.
And patience. Like, patience is a very, very big thing. You might have to pull and pull and pull in finding your opportunity, because you're looking for the person to overextend. You're looking for the person to commit on a particular angle. And here we had, a nice step inside on the straight line. Mm-hmm. But we're looking for the taller person to commit to something that gives the smaller person who has that lower center of gravity the ability to get the lead, to make that start.
Yeah, that direct counter there was...
Go for it.
Sorry, the direct counter there off the backhand is exactly what you need. It was because if you give the person with the long range a little bit of momentum, it's going to be very hard. You have to bail out, like we see in that last clip, or you have to catch him on the initial lift on that first one, and they're the keys to victory for the smaller person.
Yeah. So moving on from that, we have another fight. We'll have Eno here and Martin Seguera from Spain. And in this case, it's recognizing when you're not getting the return, when plan A or when the solution to plan A not working is not to go to plan A, as to find a new plan. And, this, I think, you watched this as well, and I think we both came to the conclusion that from the spectator's perspective, not from each of the four corners and collated, but from the spectator's perspective, this looked like a good win for Eno here.
Yeah, for me, I thought he did it a little bit more, especially in the second round. He was a bit more effective in bringing the fight and getting to hands, but obviously the clear scores and the scoreboard is what actually matters. The first round was a bit kind of flicky off the front leg. Here's the second round where we see a little bit more action. But again, the whole point of this is you probably weren't seeing the correct return that you need to on the scoreboard. So there is a time when you need to switch it up and have a plan B or something in the back pocket to go to get you some extra scores.
Yeah, and I mean, it's frustrating when you're in the ring as a competitor and you're seeing that happen, because unlike, again, if we take basketball, we take a ball sport or a field sport, it's very, very clear that a score has happened and why it's happened and that side of things. But you can get a score in ITF and a referee can't see it because they're at the wrong angle for it, or an umpire, can't see it because they're at the wrong angle for it. And that can be very, very frustrating because you do just the same hard work in order to build that score. So when you see that you're not getting the return on the scores, what do you do? And I think psychologically the first thing you have to do is almost compartmentalize that and say, okay, this is just another factor for this match today. I have to do something a little bit differently. What do I try next? And I think that's a really important thing to be able to do as you walk back to your coach that in the break, that you're going, okay, look, I thought I had 2 side kicks and 2 interactional hands. I'm like, only the hands seem to score. All right, go into the second round. The plan is not to lean on the side kick to get the score. You have to have that ability, I think.
Yeah, like a lot of the time when we see an ITF, like visually, when you're looking at this, you're like, okay, this person is a bit more aggressive. This person is going for it. But it all comes down to the clear hits.
Yes.
And a lot of the time, a lot of these interactions, there's actually no distinctive clear shot, which is getting you ahead on the scoreboard, which is the key. Like here, visually, it might look like that, but it's not the way it's scored in ITF. So you need to really understand what is a clear score, what is not. And like, just because you're throwing shots doesn't mean you're landing on the scoreboard. So that's a very important factor that you need to take into account.
Absolutely. And then the other factor on the scoreboard is remembering that the times that you kick and punch your opponent and vice versa aren't the only opportunities to score on the board. So, we have fouls and we have the warnings, and the warnings come up every single match. And
a lot of warnings in this one as well.
Yeah, and the thing is, those warnings are going to have a broad effect on the scoreboard, because the 3 warnings take a score off of every one of the 4 scorecards. So when you score off the hands and feet and you're proactive in your scoring, you're only getting the scores the referees see. Whereas when the warnings are given, those warnings are taking scores off of all the scorecards. So they have a multiplicative effect. And I think for me, in watching this one visually as a spectator, I think Ian probably edged it, from just purely from a fight fan kind of perspective. But when
it's kind of like the MMA thing, when it's like the aggression and somebody who's bringing the fight, isn't it?
Yes.
It's like, okay, you give him the 10-8 on the scorecard, the 10-9 on
sure.
the 10-muss system, but that's not the way ITF goes, unfortunately.
No, and so you have to be leaning on your coach to some degree, and you have to be able to compartmentalize your emotions as a competitor enough to recognize, okay, this is what I'm seeing on the scoreboard. I need to act based on the scoreboard, not based on how this fight feels, not based on the fact that I feel like I'm beating my opponent or beating up my opponent or whatever it happens to be. And I think very often we see competitors that, when plan A isn't getting the return that they're looking for, they go harder and deeper into plan A. And I think being able to have at least a kind of a default plan B that you can go to is a strength. So when you recognize, and we see this an awful lot where, if I was to take an example, a guy that we like to lean on from time to time with Alameen, he often starts off the matches using the front leg, using very long range shots, testing distance, keeping the person at a particular range. But when the pressure comes on, he can go back and find that blitz. And, there's at least a second game plan. He can change up the distance. he can start to use the footwork in and out quite a bit more. You know, he can go to a different tempo, he can test differently, and he can bring a different range of shots. And I think most quality fighters have that in them. They have something else they can go to. So you might be a left-legged fighter who likes to use, you know, quite a bit of range off your front leg, you know, throughout most of the match. Actually, I think a perfect example from this tournament, we saw Timmy Boss between this one where he won and the last one in Spain where I think he went out in the quarterfinal or semi-final. I can't remember exactly which one off the top of my head right now. But I think he clung too tight to his game plan in Spain, and he was a bit more flexible in his game plan in Porec. And I think, you know, that allows you to accommodate not just your opponent but the referees as well.
Yeah, you need to be able to read the scoreboard. That's where that's one of the opponents you have in a way.
Yes,
they're the people that you're fighting in a way. Is the scoreboard, to get that on your side, because that's all that matters at the end of the day. You might beat somebody up physically,
yeah,
and you might right. I won the fight. And we see it all the time with young people in sparring when they're like, "Oh, I got robbed. That referee didn't go for me and I won that clearly." It's the scoreboard. You get the scores, or you don't get the scores. So there's a big lesson there for people watching.
For sure. Our last fight, a little bit more subtle in terms of what you're going to see in this one. Two young guys, Shane Allison from Ireland and Darrell Cox from Scotland. And
Shane in blue, yeah, Darrell in red.
Yeah, and you know, they have some similar qualities. Shane's a little taller, likes to lead with that right front leg. You know, we're not seeing as much of the you know, the front leg lead from Darrell, but for me, as this goes on, I think the big key in this match is recognising who's in the driving seat in terms of controlling the controllables, in terms of the ring position, the tempo of the match, and the distance between the opponents. And you know, the way this goes, it goes to extra time, and Darrell wins in the added round. But I think Shane doesn't quite notice that he's not in control. I think he feels like he's able to hit out, to dominate, to push around. But I don't think even though his opponent could be moving backwards, I don't think Shane's controlling the distance.
Oh yeah, I think we actually seen that as well in the last one with Ian and Cristobal, but we clipped it out because they were just kind of bouncing and waiting for each other in the first round, waiting for somebody to draw almost. So that is a thing that we always try to get across, is be the proactive person. That doesn't necessarily mean throwing shots, but be proactive in your footwork, adjusting the distance, pushing, pulling, trying to make something happen, setting traps, luring people in, etc. That was a lovely little combo there from Shane. He very nice. Clear on the hands. But yeah, that's the key. You want to be the proactive side, not the one who's kind of leaving the other person take the initiative and getting you on the back foot, because that's not going to be the way that you're going to get the clearer shots. Because again, like we said in the last one, drifting towards the corners, if they're gaining momentum, you're not going to be very visible on the scoreboard. And again, that's what we're looking for, is clear shots on the scoreboard.
And, you know, again, I really enjoyed this. From a spectator point of view, this was a really nice match to watch. The two boys gave it socks. You know, neither of them pulled out of contact. You know, you had some good shots thrown and some good combinations thrown. For me, I think it's one of the things that we can do is we can fall into a pattern and not recognise that we've fallen into a pattern. And I think how Shane was carrying the front leg eventually got read a little bit by Darrell, and it became a pattern. And he started to pick moments where he could make a decent counter going to the front hand or pulling into a back kick or reverse. But really, that's just, for me, not recognising that you're not actually in control of the distance. And you feel sometimes like if you're the one throwing the shots and starting the movement, you're proactive, you're in control. And I think it's just failing to recognise that you've actually set a pattern that your opponent is reading. And, you know, like a small thing, subtle thing, but I thought this fight was a very good way to illustrate it.
Yeah, I think so. Some lovely little shots in this one as well. And like you said, great actions. The guys are going for it, highlighting a lot of the things we mentioned last week. So yeah, that is an important one. You got to, like, the three things we always say you can control is your ring position. Are you controlling it in the center? Are you happy to be out in the fringes? Second, the distance. Do you want it to be long, short? What are you looking for there? And also then you're looking at the tempo, the rhythm and the intensity that you have to the fight. So if you can kind of be in control of the three of those, you are going to be in the driving seat most of the time, and that's going to be good for you.
Absolutely. There's at least something to reference back to see, hey, how am I doing in this match? and not just looking at the scoreboard like we were talking about in the last one, which is so important, not just going by how you feel, but in terms of, you know, the things that you can control, are you actually controlling them or are you being led? And it's something that's quite important to be able to feel and be aware of.
Especially in reflection as well. Obviously, you're not going to be thinking of like ticking these 3 boxes when you're in there. You're busy. You have other bits to be contending with. But especially in reflection, and for coaches as well, it's something to be aware of. It's when you're looking for the solution, you know. So that it's just a little bit of a framework to help people to understand where they need to up their game a little bit and take a little bit more control.
For sure. So leaving that aside, what have we got for our members this week?
Yeah, so we're going to have a look at a little bit of culture and how to build the culture that you want to produce that high level that we're looking for. So we're going to get into that this week. Now, next week, we're going to be back to our live sessions again, hopefully. So we're going to get back to some of our training and using the principles we have from Fight Chat Friday to illustrate what we're working on in our classes and our sessions. So definitely get involved in the member section if that is something you're interested in.
Absolutely. Folks, that's us for this Friday, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye now.
Catch you in the next one.